Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller film named Heretic. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton, who were a pair of missionary partners responsible for distributing Mormon handbooks and conducting door-to-door evangelism. Due to the unique nature of their work, they were often regarded as oddities by their peers in town and occasionally subjected to pranks. However, their strong faith kept them from feeling discouraged. One rainy afternoon, they arrived at a solitary mansion. After locking their bicycles, Paxton knocked on the door. The homeowner, a middle-aged man named Reed, answered with a warm smile, appearing kind and welcoming. Upon learning that they were there to share their faith, Reed expressed enthusiasm. According to church guidelines, however, proselytizing required the presence of another woman. Reed assured them this was not a problem, as his wife was in the kitchen preparing some treats. After a brief and friendly chat, the two, feeling at ease, followed Reed into the house. Little did they know, leaving this place would be far more difficult than entering it. Reed enthusiastically took their coats and soon brought out drinks and an aromatic diffuser from the kitchen. He mentioned that his wife was baking a blueberry pie and was too shy to come out and meet them. To their surprise, Reed seemed well-versed in Mormonism and even owned a copy of the Book of Mormon. During their discussion, Reed posed an unusual question, asking what their thoughts were on polygamy, which was once part of Mormon doctrine. Barnes explained that polygamy was a spiritual mission necessary in those tumultuous times to increase the number of followers. However, as civilization advanced, the doctrine had been abolished since 1890. Reed, however, disagreed. He argued that if God's will could change with human progress, it implied that God was created by humans. Then he dropped a bombshell, saying he had created a real God. Barnes was at a loss for words and tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, suggesting they meet Reed's wife. Reed agreed and went to the kitchen, returning with the news that the blueberry pie was ready and inviting them to try it. At that moment, Barnes noticed something odd. The diffuser on the table was giving off a blueberry pie scent. They wondered if the aroma they had been smelling was actually coming from the kitchen. Growing suspicious, Barnes pretended to receive a phone call from the church, excused Reed, and whispered to Paxton about leaving. However, when they tried to leave, they found the front door locked and impossible to open. The only window in the living room was too small to crawl through. Worse still, their phones had no signal, possibly due to the storm, making it impossible to contact the church. With no other options, the two decided to muster their courage and head to the kitchen. Reed greeted them without any sign of suspicion. Barnes, feigning calm, told him the church just called and they wanted them to return immediately. Reed showed no objection and simply said they could go ahead if they wanted to leave. Hearing this, the two sisters quickly put on their coats, which had been lying on the bench. But in the next moment, Barnes realized that the bike key, originally in her pocket, was missing. When Paxton checked her pocket, she found the key there instead. There was only one explanation. Reed must have searched their coats and accidentally switched the keys to the wrong pocket. Not wanting to alarm him, they said nothing and politely asked Reed if he could unlock the front door. Reed's response shocked them. He said the front door was on a timed lock and wouldn't open until the next morning. However, the back door was functional and they could leave through there. Fearing a trap, the two hesitated. Sensing their unease, Reed insisted they could leave on their own and even exposed their lie about receiving a phone call. He reminded them that when they came in, he asked if they minded the metal on the walls and ceiling. Because of it, cell phones couldn't get a signal here. Stunned by the revelation, the two were momentarily speechless. Left with no better options, they finally decided to try the back door, only to find that there were two doors. Unsure which one was safe, they opened both, but neither seemed distinguishable as the right choice. Reed then elaborated on the diffuser and its blueberry scent, claiming it was meant to make them think about their beliefs. What if their faith was merely something someone else wanted them to believe? Using games and music as analogies, he argued that all religions were human inventions, iterated upon over time. He explained as the original Abrahamic religion, Judaism should theoretically have the most followers. But in reality, its followers make up only 0.2% of the global population. The reason behind it was that they don't advertise, and they don't have people like Barnes and Paxton going door to door spreading the word. Proselytizing is just religious salesmanship, selling people an ideology. Reed claimed he had a bold idea to sell to them in exchange. He asserted that the doctrines people follow today are merely iterations of ancient myths. He wrote "believe" on one back door and "disbelieve" on the other. He asked if God truly exists and they are his children, why does he only help when they pray or praise him? And if he hates homosexuality, why create so many homosexuals? But if there's no God, then humans become faithless ants. What's the meaning of life then? Reed challenged them to choose between maintaining their faith or abandoning it. Declaring that all existing religions were false and their sacred texts mere decorations, he disdainfully tossed their scripture to the ground. Barnes immediately picked it up, clutching it tightly. Meanwhile, Paxton was on the verge of a breakdown, her only thought being to escape. Pretending to be convinced by Reed's arguments, she walked toward the disbelief door. However, Barnes stood firm in his faith, subtly countering Reed's earlier points. For instance, Reed had mentioned the small percentage of Jewish followers, but ignored the impact of the Holocaust and religious persecution. Barnes's steadfastness inspired Paxton to change her mind, and together they chose the disbelief door. Opening it, they found a pitch-black corridor. As they stepped in, Reed locked the door behind them. With no choice, the two descended into the darkness, eventually reaching a decrepit wooden door. Inside was a sealed chamber. It was then they realized that no matter which door they chose, they would have ended up here. Reed had never intended to let them go. Barnes climbed to a high spot, trying to escape through a window, but it was nailed shut. She urged Paxton to refute Reed no matter what he says. He'll try to prove he's right, and that'll buy them more time. Barnes had also secretly taken a small utility knife from the corridor earlier without Reed noticing. Knowing Reed saw him as the bigger threat, Barnes handed the knife to Paxton instead. They agreed on a code word. When Barnes said it, Paxton would stab Reed in the neck. Not long after, they heard footsteps. An elderly, hunched woman entered through another door, carrying a lantern. She placed a blueberry pie on the table before them. Reed's voice echoed through the chamber via a pipe. The woman was a prophetess. She would eat the poisoned blueberry pie and die, after which Barnes and Paxton would witness a miracle, her resurrection through God's grace. The sisters checked her pulse after she collapsed and confirmed she was dead. While waiting for her to revive, the doorbell rang. It was someone from the church. As Reed went to greet him, the sisters screamed through the cracks of the door, but the room was so soundproof that no noise reached outside. The matchbox on the carpet caught their attention. Perhaps starting a fire could generate smoke to call for help. However, the plan quickly unraveled. Before they could grab the matches, Reed returned to the room after seeing off the church guy. Their actions were almost discovered when the doorbell rang again. It was the church guy returning. In a surprisingly dedicated move, he had come back just to deliver a Book of Mormon pamphlet to Reed. This unexpected visit bought the sisters just enough time to retrieve the matches without arousing suspicion. As they made their way back, Paxton noticed something unsettling. The woman's body seemed to have shifted. Her head was positioned differently than before. Barnes, however, dismissed this as paranoia. Lighting the matches proved difficult in the damp and oxygen-deprived room. After several failed attempts, they finally managed to ignite one, only for Paxton to be startled by the woman behind them. In the flickering light, the woman's face appeared even more horrifying. She began to recount terrifying visions she had supposedly seen in the afterlife. Before they could process this, Reed re-entered the room. After ensuring the woman was settled, he turned his attention to the two sisters and asked what the woman had told them. Still shaken, Paxton relayed the woman's words verbatim. Reed, undeterred, used this as further evidence of his divine claims. But Barnes wasn't convinced. To her, this was no miracle. It was a carefully staged trick. Following their premeditated plan, Barnes argued against Reed's claims, skillfully maneuvering him to a position with his back to Paxton. When the moment was right, Barnes uttered their prearranged code word. Paxton hesitated, fear paralyzing her. This delay proved fatal. Before Paxton could act, Reed turned and slashed Barnes's throat with a knife. Now entirely alone, Paxton realized her survival depended solely on herself. With Barnes out of the picture, Reed intensified his psychological assault on Paxton. He insisted she had witnessed a miracle and she should be convinced that he was akin to God. But Reed's hubris had blinded him. Paxton, emboldened by Barnes's skepticism, began piecing together the truth behind the resurrection. As Barnes had speculated, it was all human machination. While the sisters had been distracted by the doorbell earlier, Reed had swapped the woman's body for another who bore a striking resemblance. The elaborate setup was nothing more than a theatrical deception. To prove his theory, Paxton moved the table aside and uncovered a hidden trap door. Beneath it lay an intricate underground labyrinth. Strange symbols and bizarre ritualistic items adorned the walls. As Paxton ventured deeper, he discovered a locked door with a red padlock, the same one used to secure their bicycles. Using the key he had retrieved, Paxton unlocked the door and was met with a shocking sight: rows of iron cages, each holding a trembling woman. Removing her coat, she draped it over one of the captives in an attempt to comfort her. At that moment, Reed reappeared, asking if she knew what the one true religion was. Paxton now fully grasped the extent of Reed's twisted scheme. From the moment they entered the house, Reed had meticulously orchestrated their entrapment. Even the missing bicycles had been part of the ruse, ensuring the church guy would find nothing amiss. Reed's ultimate goal was to convert Paxton into one of his fanatical followers. But Paxton, determined to escape, took advantage of a momentary lapse in Reed's vigilance, stabbing him in the neck with the blade Barnes had smuggled earlier. The labyrinth, however, was far more complex than Paxton had anticipated. Exhausted and wounded, he eventually found his way out, only to discover the trapdoor to the cellar was inexplicably open. Before she could ponder further, Reed emerged and stabbed Paxton in the abdomen. The two, now gravely injured, fought desperately. Just as it seemed Paxton's fate was sealed, a battered but still breathing Barnes appeared. With one final act of defiance, Barnes swung a nail-studded wooden plank, killing Reed and saving Paxton. Exhausted from the effort, Barnes collapsed and took her final breath. In the end, Paxton managed to escape, guided by a clue in a model of the house that revealed the exit. Alone, she stumbled out into the open air, leaving behind the horrors of the house. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.